Hello, I'm Michael Redmond, professional Go player. In this video, I'm going to show you a game between Honinbo Dosaku and Yasui Santetsu, back in the 17th century. And the theme of this video is going to be attacking and sacrificing stones. So you might find that to be a bit of an unusual combination, but in this game, Dosaku, with black, he sacrifices his weakest group. He starts with some weak stones scattered around the board, and he sacrifices his weakest group with a sequence of ko's. So it's a good example of how to handle weak groups with a sacrifice. And then later in the game, he's going to take control, and with some forceful attacks, he's going to sacrifice more groups. And so it's interesting to see him sacrificing groups, and in the end he's going to end up with a solid lead in territory. Usually when people are attacking, I'd say with most people, the sacrificing part happens sort of by mistake. So it's really interesting for me to be seeing this game where I'd say he did it almost perfectly in sacrificing groups to take a positional advantage. So that's going to be the theme of this this video. And let's just start the game before I talk more about the players. Dosaku has black, and you can see he's playing a lot of the 3-5 points, the 5-3 points. It's a point on the board. He liked to play the first move in a corner at the 5-3 point, and also he liked to play the approach move at that point. So it was just a point that he really liked to play. So he's played all, actually not yet, has he? He's played all of them now. He's played all of the 5-3 points. Or at least one 5-3 point in every corner. And the way white playing is, it was according to the theory that they had at the time. White is taking a position on the upper side here to make this a strong group. And when this group is settled, the idea is that it's not going to be very valuable for black to try to do something with this stone. So basically taking the options away from black by making a strong group for white on the upper side. And it was the idea here. Also, black playing away from the lower right corner here. I think in a modern game, maybe black would be thinking about pressing here. And actually, this is the subject of a lot of exciting fights that we have in modern games now, where white might try pushing through and cutting here, which leads to a huge fight. Or white might crawl, and if white jumps... actually, AIs tend to like this shape for black. Would give black a good score, usually. But this is a kind of a variation that we would see a lot of. The idea of playing the side here and giving the corner to white is something that was very common at the time. It was a general idea. Also, black is going to get another side there and the shimari. So when black gets two corner enclosures like this, in this case it's in the upper right corner and the lower left corner. When black gets two corner enclosures like this, in the old times, in the 17th century, there was no komi. So black only had to win by 1 point on the board. And getting two corner enclosures like this was supposed to be a good strategy for black to win the game. Basically because it calms things down. But it doesn't stay calm with Dosaku. So this move is an interesting move. Quite often with black, I see Dosaku was playing moves like this, with which black is surrounding territory, playing a very tight move there. And probably just the idea of simplifying the game, keeping his own territory very solid. And then black later on is going to do various things in the areas that white controls. But there's also, it is said that Dosaku told his students not to play moves like this. So it's probably a move he just played because he was so good at positional judgment that he could actually make it work. But he actually told his students that this kind of move should not be played. It's a passive move, so maybe that's why he said that. It's interesting that he would say that after playing it himself and succeeding with it. So the players are playing towards the sides here. Maybe a bit more than you would see in a modern game. and now white plays this attachment. So this is an idea. In modern Go, you might see white playing shoulder hit. This is a very popular move with AIs again. It's the kind of move that you would see in a modern game. The attachment here is also a move that works to a degree. White's idea here is to break into the left side, and the fact that black has a low knight's corner enclosure here, it means that that corner is solid. It's already a black territory, pretty much to say. And so white can afford to allow black to add stones to that. So the idea with this attachment is that black is going to answer from the corner, and in the process, while black's corner will get more solid, white will also get some extra moves on the side. So that's why white is attaching against the corner enclosure, which is already black's territory, rather than playing close to black's stone on the side. White is hoping to attack that stone on the side. So in this variation, when white pushes here, white is again playing a very solid move here, a very solidly connected shape. This is kind of a pattern that you see a lot with a lot of the members of the Yasui family. So Yasui Santets didn't like to play moves like this that were very clearly connected. They look like rather tight moves. But in a way, these moves can be very powerful also. So in making a wall here, you can see that white has strengthened this black corner territory, but it was a black corner territory. So white has decided that he can afford to give black that corner territory that was mostly black's territory already. And white is trying to build a strong group here and hopes to attack this black stone. And in the background, there's this black stone also, which is also weak. The fact that black has two weak stones here is the reason that white has potential to attack in the general area. The fact that black has two groups to deal with. And it's what's going to make the game exciting from here on. So why don't I talk about the players just a little bit here? Honinbo Dosaku, he was an outstandingly strong player. He was a player in the 17th century, so let's see, he was born in 1645, and he lived to 1702. It's the official record. So he dominated Go for that period, and the Honinbo school, the Go school that was called Honinbo, or sometimes called the Honinbo family, it was the first Go school to become financed by the government, financed by the Japanese government in, I guess it was when the Edo era started. So, but there was a period where the Yasui school, which was the second school to be founded, was dominating the Go scene. So these two schools were probably the two most important schools. There's also the Inoue school and the Hayashi school. So there were four Go schools called Iemoto. So it's sort of like Japanese tea or flower arranging. There's certain arts or skills that were called Iemoto, and they were funded by the government. And they were considered national arts, so important things to improve. And because they were funded by the government, Go players could focus on playing Go alone, and this allowed them to study very deeply the game, and it improved the level of Go. So this is what made Japan a strong nation in the board game Go, which originated in China, but during this Edo era, I would say this is when it became really a professional pastime, a professional competition. And the players of this time were definitely professionals. They were dedicating their whole lives to Go. And so there was a period where the Yasui school was dominating this the Go scene, but after Honinbo Dosaku, the Honinbo family made a comeback, and it was mostly because of Dosaku, because he was so brilliant. And he changed the opening theory. At that time, there was not so much. They had their secret weapons, you might say. So they had these openings that they studied just within one school, and then in important games they would bring them out sort of spring them on their opponents. And so the Honinbo school had an advantage when he was very strong in his theory of the opening, and he was also a very strong player in the tactical fighting in the middle game also. Dosaku eventually became Meijin. So he became Meijin in 1678. So it was 11 years after this game. So at this time, he was still in an intermediate stage in his career. But while Meijin can be called equivalent to 9-dan rank when compared with the ranks of that day, he was called a 13-dan by some people because he was just so outstandingly strong, and he could give handicaps to most of the best players of his time. His opponent with white, Yasui Santetsu, he was also a prodigy, I would say. He was one of the strongest players of the Yasui school, but he did not become the Iemoto, or the leader of his house, because he was very young when his father died, the previous leader of that school, and he was considered too young to become the leader. So he was sort of outside of the leadership of his school at that time, but he was one of the strongest players of the era. And actually, Santetsu is going to become a 7-dan eventually, at the same time that Dosaku becomes a Meijin. So in those times, 7-dan was usually as high as you could get. It was the highest rank. And then after that, there was a player called the Meijin, who was the leader of the entire Go community. And he was 2 ranks above a 7-dan. So you could say the Meijin was a 9-dan. And sometimes there was a Jun Meijin, or kind of a vice Meijin, who could be called an 8-dan. And so it was a 1 rank difference from a Jun Meijin to a Meijin. And the Jun Meijin was 1 rank above the 7-dan. But apart from maybe these 2 players, all the top players were 7-dans. So Santetsu also became a 7-dan, making him one of the top players of that time in Go. So back to this board position. This is where Dosaku starts doing his sacrificing. He has these 2 weak black stones, and he has to decide which is going to be the main group and which is going to be the group that he can afford to sacrifice. And that's a decision that has to be made now. So it's an important idea. And Dosaku decided, well, I'm guessing that he decided, the way he plays sort of demonstrates that he decided that this is the stone, the move that I've left a mark on, is the stone that he can afford to sacrifice. But sacrificing stones is kind of a fine art, because like if you just leave it and it dies, and white gets this huge area, for instance, that's not really a constructive way of sacrificing a stone. You have to do something with it and get some recompense for sacrificing the stone. So we're going to see how Dosaku does that. He's getting something back for it. So he starts with this move. So he's actually starting the whole fight with this group in the upper left, instead of doing anything with the left side stone. Both of these groups, actually, although I say that Dosaku has decided to sacrifice this stone in the upper left, so in some cases, maybe he's going to sacrifice the other stone on the left side. It sort of depends on how white replies. But he starts with this and this. This combination here is something, it's a kind of a pattern, almost like a josegi up to this point, where black is playing this exchange, and it was sort of good to have this exchange in first, because afterwards, if black plays this stone later, white's probably not going to connect on the third line. So what I'm saying here is, just to make a diagram for that, if black starts with this, then the next move, black cannot play here now because white would just push through. So it's not going to work the same way. So black starts with this move and then plays here. And if white plays an Atari towards the corner, then this stone, this exchange here that black played, it's working well for black. Because when white connects here, black has a hanging connection both underneath and on the top. So these 2 shapes are both connected shapes. It's working fairly well for black. White would continue with a cut here and capturing the 1 stone on the top, but black can capture some white stones on the side. So this would be a reasonably good result for black. So white connected. That makes sense. Now black plays the call. So this is where a mundane move, you might say, would be to play here. This would be, it would be okay. It would be okay. It would be alive. If white plays here, black can probably make a life with this. But it's going to be slightly painful. And of course, white will be able to attack on this side also. Maybe with white 2, but basically white 2 is going to be a forcing move at any point. So instead, black plays the ko. And black is playing this ko if white, for instance, backs away from it. This is so much better for black. Black will have 2 eyes, and white's group on the side is starting to be putting under pressure there a little bit. It's not 100% alive yet. So white cannot afford to back away from this ko. It has to play the ko. And if black wins this ko, somehow, that's going to be a completely alive shape. So it will deal with that group without having to do all this painful stuff on the second line that I was talking about earlier. This would be like locally, it would be something like this. Black would crawl. And to be fully alive, black would probably have to play this move. It's going to be a bit painful. So black doesn't really want to be playing all these stones on the second line and is trying to avoid that by playing the ko. And if black can win this ko, for instance, like this, then that settles the whole thing. It's going to be much easier for black. So this is a ko that white would like to win. And black has the perfect ko threat, which is here. If white answers that somehow, black's going to take, and now it's really difficult for white to find a good ko threat. So white finished the ko. And so that was the first ko. Relatively easy to understand, I think, when a ko is quickly resolved like this. It's a lot of people sort of don't like kos, find them too complicated to understand. And kos can be complicated. But if you have a simple idea with just one ko threat to think about like this, it's relatively easy to see how the game will change. So it was like this. So this is the first trade where black has completely reduced white's area in the lower right, which is pretty important. And to demonstrate that, I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about this position again. So this is a position where white was trying to stage an attack on the left side of the board, or maybe in the upper left area. And white wants to take control of the game. You can see that black's territories are fairly solid. Black has an area here, which is most likely going to become a black territory. And this area is pretty solid too. So there's these areas that in most cases are going to become black's territories. And white is a little bit more loose. So white is going to be fighting on the left side of the board strongly, hopefully, and is trying to attack black there. And the last stop, what white will do finally, is to complete this area here. So there's this little square area in the lower right part of the board, which looks like it's going to be something like 30 points for white. And it's this 30-point area where white is going to, after attacking black on the left half of the board, white it will finally finish off this area and make it into a territory maybe. Because there are some weaknesses that were still in that area. So that was white's, you might say, game plan. And playing this ko had to do with that, because this ko threat completely takes away that potential from white. So it's a pretty effective ko threat in which black is starting to control the lower side, and white's area there that was looking like 30 points, most of it is gone. So it's just this chunk of about 10 points in the corner that's left. So black got something back from that ko. I think that one of the things that is frightening for players playing kos is that it's so devastating in the area where you've lost the ko. Like this area here in the upper left where black has lost the ko. It's like that solid wall of white stones with just a few black stones sort of plastered against white's wall. It looks pretty bad. So it's sometimes hard to judge the overall position when the local positions are so one-sided. And that's what makes kos difficult for some people to understand maybe. But I think you have to just take it easily, because you're getting something back on a different part of the board. And so it's okay to have a bad local position. And Dosaku is going to take that one step further. So we'll see how it works again. When white starts to attack this black stone on the left, now this black stone, it's in a bit of trouble. And again, there's these two groups, you might say. There's this group centered around this black stone, and there's this black group, the black stone on the left. They're both liable to die pretty soon. And so black has to, again, try to do something with this general area. Because if black leaves it, then we're going to end up with just to sort of roughly surround the general area where white has an advantage. If white can build a line of stones somewhere along that line, it's going to be so big that it's going to be enough for white to win the game usually. So black has to do something with that. And again, black's going to try to choose which of these two groups to save. And so black starts with this move. So it's still a position where black is having weak groups. Black does have a strong position on this side of the board, but in the upper left area, black does have weak groups. So black's going to try out a ko again. So it's another ko to deal with the weak groups. This upper side, it's going to be a ko just about whatever white does. And since black has already lost a ko once, it's okay for black to lose a ko again, and this time it's going to actually die. But black's going to get another trade out of it. So it's a good way to deal with stones that are in a lot of trouble anyway, is to make a ko out of it, and then just trade them away for some other profit. In general, I find that a lot of players have trouble with sacrificing stones. I think it's human to have an attachment to the stones you've put on the board, and you don't want to see them die. But it can be very effective to sacrifice stones, and actually, Dosaku is going to take this to an extreme in this game. So even if white plays something like this, which seems to be avoiding a ko, black can still get a ko with moves like this. It's whatever happens when white plays an Atari here, starting to try to take away black's eye space, black will always be playing a ko here. So it's going to turn into some kind of a ko. No matter what white does, it's going to be difficult for white to avoid some kind of a ko here. So white plays strongly locally, and the timing of this move, it's when black has not decided what he's going to do on the upper side. Black still has options like, for instance, a cut on the fourth line, or the game move was later this move here. Just leaving it unclear what black is going to do locally, and playing this kind of a peep move here, asking how white answers. So white pushed through here, and now black plays the ko. So if white plays some submissive move, some passive move like this, then black is going to play here. This is going to be a ko. It's going to be, for instance, if this happens and this happens, black can play a ko. If white backs away from it, it's going to be two eyes, again, depending on this ko. So there's no way that white can avoid the ko here. And white just goes for it. So it's probably better for white to be playing this way, and white hopes to quickly resolve the ko without giving black too much in return. But it's a ko in which black is just trying to get two moves in a row somewhere. And in this board position, black's already played a ko threat in this area, taken profit once. Now next time, where does black take the second profit? For this ko on the upper side, black is going to try to do something with these stones. And that was what this stone was about, because it's going to take part in it. It's going to be an important stone there. So black continues with this and extends. And it's very convincing, this stone here. It's going to work very well to help black make good shape here. You might notice that the white stones also are not completely settled. They're sort of up against a strong black group, so white doesn't have any potential towards the lower left corner, but has to enclose black from above. So it's very important for white to keep that line. White continues here. While people tend to focus on the opening theory, Dosaku did introduce a lot of modern ideas, well, modern at the time. They actually, Dosaku's ideas worked for centuries. So a lot of those ideas were alive in Go when I was studying the game. And so he invented a lot of ideas that have lasted to modern times. And a lot of them were brand new. Some of the ways he analyzed the board were new ways to do it at the time. So people focus on that part of his strength. But I also noticed that he's very strong at the fighting. His tactical strength is very strong. To the extent that when I study his games with an AI, with, for instance, Katago, with most professional games, I can usually get a fairly good picture of what's going on with just a few thousand playouts. Even maybe 1,000 playouts is good enough usually to get a general idea of how the game went. But it doesn't work so well with a lot of Dosaku's games. The calculation doesn't seem to be good enough, and the computer is giving the wrong answer until I make it do more playouts. So it has to do a lot of playouts before it gets to the same conclusion that Dosaku had. And in this game also, there was a lot of cases where I found that it didn't seem to be understanding the deep calculation that Dosaku did. So that's going to start here, basically, when Dosaku plays this move. And white is going to allow him to capture that white stone. White doesn't really have a choice, actually. So to show you what happens here, for instance, if white pulls out, and black can play the Hane here, head of 2 stones. And this is the shape move here that probably gives black a slight advantage in the race to capture here. So for instance, if white plays on this side, black would cover in the center, and black has an advantage in the race to capture. So let's see, white has about 4 liberties. Black will have slightly more. So just to continue a little bit, something like this might happen. And in a position like this, we can already count 5 liberties for black, and white only has 4. So actually, black will probably win by a few more liberties. Let's do it correctly and put the cut in. Something like this. There's a Tetsuji here on the side, which increases black's liberties. So at this point, black has 3. And it's a ko but white has 2. So it's an advantage. Actually, black can avoid the ko just by playing the more simple move. And this would be a 1-move difference also. So black wins the semi. Yeah, so that was probably a bit too much detail. But 4 is the key point, the vital shape move that allows black to have an advantage there. And if white pushes through, you can see how this stone on the 4th line, how this stone was giving black these 2 forcing moves here, which are going to make a difference in the center. So black extends here, has a forcing move here. This is threatening a net at this point. This would capture the 3 white stones. And like this. This is still looking good for black. Like, white does have 2 outside liberties, but it's still going to be a difficult fight for white to win. And even if we assume that white wins the semi on the left, it's going to take a lot of stones inside the left side for white to finish that off. And black's going to have a pretty large area here. So worst case scenario, black's going to get a big moyo on the lower side. So that probably works for black also. So in the game, white pulled back here, and black actually got to capture this 1 stone. So while black was starting a ko on the upper side, the ko was just kind of a diversion here. It was something that black was setting up on the way. It wasn't as if black could immediately get any value out of it. Because if black had played the capture at sometime in the middle of this fight on the left side, it's not clear whether white would actually have to answer that. Maybe white would play something here, and black would still need another move here to start a real ko. So it would take 2 moves to start the ko. A bit more complicated in the execution. So black's just simply playing to build on the left side. And this group on the left side is starting to look fairly healthy. And white finishes the ko. White has finished the ko, but black is going to still take it. So there's still a bit of annoyance value here. And white is playing these moves as ko threats. Locally, these moves are reasonable moves. So white jumps out here, black connects underneath. This is threatening to cut black again. So if black plays away, for instance, and white plays here, there are variations like this that could be a bit annoying for black. So, for instance, this kind of thing. This would be very bad for black. This would be dead already. So that's an example of how it can go wrong. And black added a stone. So that settled that position. And in the process here, white got 2 stones towards the center, which are going to help out this group, hopefully. It's a very loose connection, and we're going to see how that sometimes and sometimes doesn't work. But white is building towards the center, and it works fairly well with white's next local move, which is this one. This is kind of a vital point here, which is, again, it's building on this area here. It's trying to make a good shape for white in this general area, and it's putting pressure on the black group. The comparison is with black jumping out here, which was also a pretty good point. If black could have chosen to play here. This would have been a big point also, and it would have been putting some pressure on the white group. So this is a move that actually black could have played here. But in the game, black played here, and white played this point. So black takes the ko, and is just going to play this one move. So black has already played, traded for this ko twice. Black got to save this group while white was fighting the ko. Black got the 2 moves in the lower right corner. So basically, black has traded for that ko twice, and only needed a little extra with this move here, which white answered here. And now black's alive on the side. So when looking at this shape in the upper left, for some people it might just look terrible for black. Look at all those dead black stones inside the white territory. It looks like black has just sacrificed a huge amount. And there's actually a way of trying to judge this kind of situation where there's a lot of stones bunched together inside an opponent's territory. And it's called tewari, which means basically it's a method of taking stones off the board to try to simplify the position or compare it to something that you can more easily recognize. So to do this, we look at the black stones here inside white's territory. And so let's count the number of stones that were killed. Let's just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's count this 1, 2, 6. And then there was a black stone captured here and a black stone here and here. So that's 9 black stones that were captured. And those 9 stones are pretty useless for black. I'm sort of hesitating to include this one, but let's include it just for good measure. Because there's kind of a wasted black stone on this side too. So let's say it's 9 black stones that are completely wasted. But there's a lot of white stones inside there that were wasted too. So what you do is you try to take 9 stones, just looking at this. Let's see if I can circle it cleanly. This area here. We'll just take 9 white stones off of that and try to create a position that looks more easy to recognize. So it would be something like this. White actually had 13 stones in that, 14 stones in that area. So I took them all off and I left these 5 stones on. You can see white seems to be using a lot of stones to make that territory there. And the stones that are taken off, that was just 9 black stones and 9 white stones. So it's the same amount of territory. It's as if black played 9 moves and white played 9 moves to capture it. It's this size of territory. It's about 30 points, more than 30 points, but it's a lot of stones that white had to use to capture it. And in the process, black did get some significant co-threats in. So in the lower right corner here and on the left side, black was getting some significant profit from the co-threats. So to look back at the original position here, obviously this position is better for white. It's a lot, it's pretty impregnable. So it's locally a better position for white, but there is the fact that black got actual real close threats in compensation for that. So it was worth it, even though white has such a strong position. So that's how sacrificing with ko's work. And that was sort of the first phase of this game where black had weak groups and was sacrificing with a ko. And after this, it's going to change a little bit, because when black plays here, black has settled his final weak group. At this point, this group is already alive. Let's take it just one more move. White curled around and black pulled black. So black has an eye here, and sort of has an eye on the side here. And I'm going to talk about that later in the game. Towards the end of the game, I'm going to take a closer look at black's eyes, but for the time being, black's sort of out in the center too. So for instance, a move somewhere around here would probably create another eye towards the center. And so black's okay for the time being. White doesn't even really have any forcing moves in the vicinity. If we look at the right side, there's this white stone that is sort of cut off. Black has a strong position on the lower side. So black has sort of run out of weak stones. Black has settled everything in return for giving a huge territory to white in the upper left. It was worth it. White's marked stone there is potentially weak. And also these white stones on the left, they do not have two eyes. And there's a bit of distance between the two white groups that I've marked here with the blue lines. They're a bit far away from each other. So there's some room, maybe, for black to break out here. And that's going to happen a little bit later. But it's something that black is looking to try to do. For the time being, white's going to try to do something about that the marked stone on the right. White starts with cutting here. And just once. White doesn't continue with the cut because it's time to do something with this stone. So white moves out with that stone. And is hoping to counterattack black. And the way black handles this is another part of this game that I'm admiring. It's just some of these fighting techniques that we see with Dosaku, they're just amazing. You would expect black to play all of his moves in regard to this group itself. And it's not what he's going to do. So he starts with this move, which is kind of an asking move. Black is threatening to kill white in the corner. If black plays next, for instance, at a point such as even a move here would kill this white group. So in this position where black is still sort of out in the open on the left side, black is playing this forcing move to see how white answers in the corner. White peeps once. This exchange makes a hanging connection here. And the virtue of this hanging connection is that it's going to stop black from connecting underneath. For the time being, that is. So after this, if black tries to connect with this move, white can capture the stone. And obviously, this hanging connection here is what makes this a connected shape for white. So that was important. It was important for white to play that peep. And suddenly black just plays on the opposite side of the board. And this is because black has kind of an escape shoot at this point. So there's this Sarari on the first line, which if black plays it with a good timing, it's going to be forcing towards the corner, and black's going to be able to connect up to the right side territory. So this is kind of the ace up his sleeve that Dosaku has, and he's going to playing it with a beautiful timing. He's going to start with the attack on the left, actually. White answered once, and now black plays here. And as this happens, black's group on the right seems to be getting into trouble. He's waiting for the last moment. So he plays once more here, moving out into the center. And white decided just to push through. So if black goes after the one stone, white's idea is to connect up in the center. That final move, maybe white's going to play it here, just to make a strong position in the center. This would be okay for white. This is what white is trying to do. The moment white pushes through here, black plays this move. So this is perfectly timed. If black waits too long, for instance, if black plays here, it's going to be too late because although the white's corner group is not alive with 2 eyes, it has 1 eye. So having 1 eye here, it means that when black's group has no eye at all, white's going to win this race to capture. So this would be a collapse for black. Black plays the forcing move 1 move earlier. So when black plays this move now, if white continues with something like this, now black pushes through and can kill the corner. So it would be like this. At this point, black would probably return to the center. Maybe this way, yes. And capture. And it's a ko in the corner. And also there's trouble. There's going to be trouble in the center when black plays at this point and starts to attack in the center too. So this is not working for white. It's just too bad. White had to answer in the corner. So with this exchange, played at the last moment, this exchange enables black to connect on the side, and black can play the stronger move in the center now, which is this move. Black really wants, having previously played this stone, black really wants to play actively in the center with this move, starting a fight here. So this is going to be the decisive fight, and black gets to connect to the side, and we have a fight where there's this white group, which is weak. These 2 black stones are weak too, and there's this white group here. And we're going to see black try to disconnect white. So white has a position here. Let's just say it's these 2 groups that look like they're almost connected. If white can connect all these marked stones to each other, or it doesn't even need this stone. So just these stones, if they can connect up to each other, this is going to be good for white, provided white doesn't have to sacrifice these stones on the right. So it's not really clear who's attacking at this point. And white jumps out. This is a natural looking move. And black is going to go back to trying to split white into 2 here. So white is kind of desperately trying to connect in the center. You can see there's some space there. But also, white is starting to surround these 2 stones. So maybe white's going to be able to survive on this side. But this group on the left is the one that black is going to attack very strongly. So black jumps out, hitting towards the left side. And basically white probably has to cut through here. So white pushes through and cuts. Okay, so black pushes here. So this is where it gets really, both players are showing us some neat tricks. So first of all, if white just simply connects here, black is going to play here and push white around in the center. White's connection there, at this point, there is a potential cut if black plays here. These black stones, they're okay for the time being. And black is threatening this move also. So in this variation, there's this weakness here, which can potentially be a problem for white. So it looks very, very dangerous for white. So in the game, white pushed through here. This is a very sharp, clever move. If black covers on this side, now white is threatening to capture 4 stones, so black has to connect here, and white can capture on the outside. So that's how this move would work. Otherwise, if black just pushes through here, white can push through once more, another forcing move, and white gets a cut. So that's how white's move is supposed to work. And so black makes another sacrifice. So black sacrifices these 4 stones. It was kind of a forced sequence. But looking at Dosaku's games, I think this whole thing was planned. This was actually a point where Katago seemed to favor white and thought that black was losing a lot. But it turned out that at the number of playouts I was doing at that time, Katago just didn't see some of the things that Dosaku already had ready. So that was pretty amazing. To be frank, I haven't seen at levels like 3,000 playouts or something like that. I haven't seen many games where Katago has trouble assessing a position like that. but in many of Dosaku's games, it does seem to have trouble to see all of the variations that Dosaku has read out. Very clearly, his play is planned. It's a planned sequence where he's going to take control of the game. And this is the key move here. This is the move that sort of dominates the flow of stones. Much more powerful, much more forceful than the more natural move of just playing a hanging connection here would be. So he plays the knight's move, and white has to wriggle out of there because white doesn't have any eyes on the left. So the white moves are all forced. White pushes through, and this is threatening to capture the two black stones. This is actually something worth showing, I think. Black cuts here. Then black only has 2 liberties. If black plays here, well, actually, white can just play this way too, I guess. So this would be one way to capture it. The more fun way would be to throw in and capture in a ladder. So black cannot do that and has to extend once more, and white connects. White is still not connected. White's not connected, but if black goes after these stones, black's going to be in trouble in the center of the board. With those black stones there on the upper half of the center, these stones, and these stones also with the cutting point at the triangle. There's a cutting point there. White has something like 7 liberties for this group here. White has about 7 liberties, 6 or 7 liberties, depending on whether white cuts at the mark point or not. So that's going to be enough for white to capture one of these 2 black groups, if white can surround them. So this looks a bit dangerous for black, but black is holding that in reserve. This is going to be the final blow, that if white tries too hard in the other parts of the board, black is going to use this as the final attack. So this is the threatened move, which black cannot quite use yet. So black's going to play here. And this position here, white can capture it with a net, and black's going to lose by 1 move. So to show you the game variation, white captured with a net. And black is losing by 1 move in the center, but can afford to. We're going to see how that works later. That's going to be the game variation. Actually, it's arguable that white should have just played away. But in this case, black's probably going to play a forcing move here. And as I was saying before, this is threatening to play here. If black has captured this white stone here, next white can cut black can cut the white group off. So white will have to answer that. Maybe something like this. And then black will protect in the center. This is actually forcing towards white's center group. So this group has captured 4 stones, but that's just 1 eye. It needs a second eye. It's not going to get any second eye towards the lower side because black has a peak here, which is stopping white from doing that. So white's going to have to make the second eye. White's going to be able to make it somewhere around here. So it's not as if it's going to die, but white needs to actually go ahead and do that fairly soon. You might notice that this black group, it has to do with white's group in the center. So if white can capture this black group on the right side, then white's center group doesn't need eyes after all. So white might start with this. The black group actually it's alive, because white has to go back and protect the cut on the 4th line, and black can live. So locally, this is a reasonable result, but after that, if white, for instance, plays something like, let's see, something like this would live in the center. So that's relatively easy, but then black would start attacking white on this side. So black's attack will continue, and this is probably a good result for black. So in the game, white played the net. It's pretty intuitive just to capture in a net when you know you can capture. Like although this other move was also possible, I think seeing that I could capture in a net with white, I would probably play this move. Black is going to get something out of it though. So black now protects. this is sort of where Dosaku is already starting to simplify the game. Black is connecting here to save these 5 stones. And by doing so, by strengthening that group, Black is threatening to play and kill White on the left side. So if White plays a move, for instance, like this, to resolve some problems that we're going to see in the center area, then Black can continue with this. And the White group on the left is dead now. And if White plays this, it's no problem now, because Black can just run out. And because of this connection here, which Black played to start with, that's what the connection was doing. It's protecting the Black stones, and White doesn't have any stones on that side to attack. So without that, White would just, at this point, cut at the marked point and capture 5 Black stones. But when Black is connected there, White cannot do that, obviously. So this connection is basically, it's a direct threat against White's stones on the left. So White answered here, moving forward with the attack on Black's stones in the center. So if Black plays here, obviously this is going to be a different story, with White having a number of ways to capture Black there. White could play here. Black only has 3 liberties, so it's not as if Black can accomplish anything here. So that was White's idea. Going back to the game, now Black plays here. So this is the final squeeze that Black had ready, and you might notice he's sacrificing some stones here now. So that was, I sort of lost count, but maybe the 3rd sacrifice. After sacrificing, Black sort of sacrificed these stones twice. So, and then Black sacrificed these stones, and now Black's going to sacrifice these stones. It's amazing to see how he can get a territorial advantage while sacrificing basically right and left, so sacrificing just about everything. And later on he's going to sacrifice these stones also. But actually, these 4 stones, these are the ones that are going to come back to life. So it's these 4 stones that ended up not being sacrificed because of this move that Black has just placed. This move is going to create a squeeze where White runs out of liberties and Black can break through here to save these stones with a squeeze, basically. So a squeeze. So we come to the final stage of the game record. Actually, this game, I'll just show you the final 3 moves. So it ended with Black playing here and here, and the game record says that Black won by 10 points. At this point in the game, when I researched it, it didn't look like Black was winning by 10 points, but probably several points, 5 or 6 points, or something like that. But without having to give Komi, that's certainly enough for a solid win for Black. But in this position, I doubt that I would sacrifice these stones like this. So this is the final sacrifice, which was sort of counterintuitive. Like, it's probably the natural move would be to play here, just because if Black can save these stones, let's have White play some random move. Then next Black can play here and kill White on the left side. So these are kind of, they're key stones. They're cutting stones that are threatening to kill White on the left. And so it's sort of counterintuitive to not to be saving them. But I sort of gave you a preview there. There is the fact that White has this attachment at 4 on the left side. So this is what I believe to be the real reason that Dosaku did not play to save these stones in the center. And it's the reason that actually no one actually saw or commented on until now. But this is probably the real reason, is that White has this attachment, which is threatening kind of a ko on the left. So if Black saves everything like this, then White is going to get a ko on the left side. You might think that this move here and this move here are niai. They are interchangeable points, while Black has 1 eye here in the center. But there's a problem with that, because White can play the hanging connection. Black plays here, and White plays here. With this stone here on the second line waiting to connect up to White, White can just pull back on the first line, basically forever. So this is going to be a ko like this. So there is a ko there that black has to deal with. I would say this is probably still a win for black. Black can play a lot of Ataris here on the second line while fighting the ko. Black can use all of these Ataris as ko threats. So black has some local ko threats, but it's going to complicate the game. So if black starts by making this big fight in the center of the board, maybe white's going to continue a little bit more here. White might be continuing a bit more in the center. But if this fight heats up, it could turn into some co-threats for white, potentially. And it could complicate the position. So I think that what black was doing with just sacrificing these stones in the center, making them less important, it means that if white starts something like this, black can just allow white actually to capture these two stones, which is a sequence that allows white to live in the center. You can see that if black had been looking to cut white off at this point, black would not be, it's not really a good idea for black to give white 2 eyes. So it doesn't work well in this variation where black is trying to cut at this point, sacrificing these 2 stones. It's not really, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work well with the move where black is trying to escape. But when black plays here and says just go ahead and take those 4 stones, I think it's okay for black to give up the 2 stones. And as far as territory is concerned, it's sort of an even trade, where black's getting some territory on the side, on the second line, and white gets some territory in the center. So it's not a decisive game for white. And in this variation, it still looks like black is going to win by several points. So this is as far as the game record went. And yeah, I'll just show you the result here. Black wins by 10 points. And the game record only goes up to this move. But the official record of this game does say that black won by 10 points. In this time, I guess it was about 300, 400 years ago, it is quite often the case that they did not finish the game records. I sort of have the suspicion that in some cases they were just leaving it as an exercise for students, so they had records that were incomplete on purpose. And there were some cases where it was just the fact that the record taker was not really a professional player and just took a record up to a certain point of the game. And this time they did have no time limits, so they didn't generally have time controls, so it meant that they played a near to perfect endgame. So there are very few mistakes in the endgame, although I do notice that Dosaku seems to gain at the last stage of the game. So looking at this position, I would say he's winning by, my research of the position says that he seems to be winning by 5 or 6 points. But I'm not really surprised that he ended up winning by 10 points, because he does seem to sort of inch ahead and gain a few points in the final stages of the game. And it seems to be a pattern with his games. He seems to have an edge there in the endgame. So that was my commentary of this game. Very much I was focusing on sacrificing and attacking. So quite often sacrificing while you're trying to attack is mostly an accident, as I said before, and it gets messy. This is a very rare case where it's working perfectly, just because Dosaku was such a brilliant player. And finally, I'd like to talk once more about Yasui Santetsu. Although he was a brilliant player, he had very little success against Honinbo Dosaku. So he was pretty much dominated by Dosaku. And eventually he actually had a interest. You might call it a hobby, actually. He had an interest in astronomy, which was not a very well-developed field at the time, but they did have ways to measure the seasons by measuring the stars and doing angles and that kind of thing. And he became an expert at that, and eventually became the first official astronomer for the Japanese government, because they were having trouble with their lunar calendar at the time. It wasn't very accurate, and I think it was based on an ancient Chinese lunar calendar, so it was probably based on an area that was geographically slightly different. and very antique. So they were behind the times with their calendar, and he revised it. He made a new calendar that actually worked for them. So he made a new calendar and became the official astronomer and stopped being a Go player. I think that was in 1685. So that's when he changed his name. There's actually a story about him, a book about him, how he became the official astronomer. So he's a very unusual professional Go player who is brilliant in more than one way. So that finishes my video for this game. Thank you for watching and enjoy.